Good morning, Who Dat Nation, and happy week 17 Bayou Blitz family. For all of you that are joining us live, thank you for getting up so early and spending your Sunday morning with Brendan Boylan and myself and your Bayou Blitz Week 17 pregame show. We decided to go a little bit early, rip the Band-Aid off, get it over with. That's our philosophy here at the Bayou Blitz. And with that, I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. And joining me off to the other side of the screen is my equally holiday fatigued co-host and friend, Brendan Boylan. Happy week 17, Brendan. It's almost over.
It is almost over. We have one more holiday to go to, right?
Yeah.
But I think New Year's is one of the easier ones. We keep it simple here. We have our traditions, right? Which is typically just Chinese takeout and sit at home because, like I said, it's supposed to be an easy holiday. Outside of just having to stay up, I'm getting to that age where it's starting to get hard. So I guess eating a ton of Chinese food that night doesn't help either.
No.
But we're getting to that point. You guys might be getting to that point about 1:30 today with what a stellar matchup between the Raiders and the Saints. Look, it's the last home game of the season for those of you who are going out to the Superdome today, enjoy what is the last trip to the Superdome for a little bit of period of time, but can't promise you it's going to be a pretty one. Can't promise you it's going to be an entertaining one. However, I do like your odds on at least competitive football game in terms of the score, just because both teams are really bad. And even more so, the Saints are beat up. And we've been saying it all year, but I think the Saints themselves have finally realized how beat up they are. Not in playoff contention at this point, right? Officially and mathematically eliminated last week. So I think they've started to, fold it up, pack it in. Saw a couple guys go on IR yesterday. And with that, Bob Rose has your complete list of injury riddled. That's what IR stands for, right? Injury riddledness that the Saints are. So Bob, some of those IR moves this week didn't come as a surprise, but I know you have all of them in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, really injury-wise, there's no surprises here. Eric McCoy, the center and left guard Lucas Patrick were officially placed on injured reserve yesterday. Shouldn't take anybody by surprise. We were told that McCoy and Patrick probably wouldn't play again this year. About a week and a half ago, to make after those moves made, two roster holes. The Saints did elevate linebacker Isaiah Stallbird and rookie guard Kyle Hergel from the practice squad, along with running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was a standard elevation. So we may get to see Edwards-Helaire in a Saints uniform for the first time. Very interested to see what transpires there. The other injury news, Derek Carr, not going to play against his former team. Still going to sit this one out with that fractured left hand. Alvin Kamara with that groin injury, just 50 yards shy of 1,000. Man, I know it's tantalizing, but he ain't going to get it today. Alvin Kamara going to be in street clothes as well. So we're going to see more of Kendrick Miller. I mentioned Edwards-Helaire, and Chris Olave. Even though Chris has been practicing and has been medically cleared, as far as we've heard, Chris Olave will also not be playing today. However, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who missed last week's, I'm going to use air quotes now, game against the Green Bay Packers. MVS, looks like he's going to be a go today, with that chest injury that kept him out of action last week. Those are the major injury updates for the New Orleans Saints. Make sure you stay tuned to John Hendricks and or the Saints News Network about an hour, closer to 90 minutes before kickoff. We'll also have the today's inactive report on both sides.
Yeah, none of those things coming as a surprise. While the Saints are beat up, the Raiders maybe not equally as beat up, but they're going to be missing some key guys as well. For those of you who have not been paying attention to the Las Vegas Raiders. You are not the only ones, I guarantee it. But they're a little beat up. Some of their standout players, Max Crosby on injured reserve, he's out for the remainder of the year. Zamir White, who I thought was having maybe not a breakout year, but was starting to find his own, hit his stride in the NFL a little bit. The running back is on IR as well. The Raiders in a similar situation to the Saints, where they've played quarterback roulette this year because of injuries. It is Aiden O'Connell who will get the go today, the former Purdue man, and of course Spencer Rattler on the other side for the New Orleans Saints. I guess the one nice thing for Derek Carr today, I know we're going to say nice things about Derek today. You guys are shocked. If Carr had played today and lost, he would have become the first player in NFL history to lose to every single franchise, all 32 franchises. I believe he's the only quarterback that's lost to 31.
Not sure.
But he would have made history in becoming the first to lose to all 32. So he gets to escape that. So congratulations, Derek. You don't have to do that. One thing I did find interesting, Bob, the Saints obviously sitting at a little bit of a better record than the Raiders, not by much. The Saints 5-10, the Raiders 3-12. But the Saints underdogs at home against a team with a worse record. Do you see it that way as well because of the injuries, or is this Saints team finally hit a point in the season where they are as bad as the Raiders of the world?
They are as bad as the Raiders of the world, and anybody who subjected themselves to that punishment of watching, the Monday night debacle, in Green Bay, I don't know how you could come away with any other thought. The Saints had lost to the Carolina Panthers. They've barely beaten the New York Giants. They were. Just think of it. The fact that the Raiders are favored in the Superdome that surprised me too, Brendan. But it is a testament to how far down that this Saints franchise has fallen. But again, if you're the Vegas odds makers, I think I'd be tempted to do the same thing. You've seen how bad the Saints have played. They got curb stomped at home earlier in the year when they were closer to fully healthy, against the Buccaneers, against the Broncos. They put up 8 points against them. I know they're a playoff team, but in my opinion, an overrated Chargers team. It's just a bad Saints team. And I know it's an equally bad Raiders team, but when you look at the players that are going to be missing for New Orleans, and the fact that the Raiders are coming off a 1-game winning streak against Jacksonville last week. It disappoints me, but I guess it shouldn't shock us, folks.
Yeah. However, beating Jacksonville isn't saying much. That was a weird one, right? And a lot of people thought it was a weird one because the way some of these games have worked out amongst the bottom of the league have certainly changed draft statuses for some of these teams as well. Jerry popping into the chat saying you guys are on early to the Saints play at 8:30 in the morning. It might save some of you trouble if the Saints play at 8:30 in the morning. No, we're early today. Some things going on scheduling wise, so we still wanted to give you guys a pregame show. So we're just here early today. So thanks for coming in and hanging out with us very early in the morning, especially for you guys in the Gulf Coast region.
And as a programming announcement too, just before we went on the air, Brendan and I were talking about giving you guys kind of a playoff pregame, during wild card, divisional championship, maybe Super Bowl II. We'd like to hear your thoughts to see if you tune in. If we did something like that, just a little bit of fun. Obviously all you guys follow the NFL. Brendan and I follow the NFL, so it wouldn't necessarily be Saints related. Yes, we'd like to hear your thoughts, be it in the chat here or later in the week when we do our Thursday episode this week with Alan Harwick. Just to see if you tune in to a playoff pregame with us too.
Yeah, Molly immediately throws in the chat that she'd be here. So, all right, we got one vote. Jerry says he'd go for it. He says go for it as well. So there we go. 2 votes.
I love it.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Let's talk Saints this week. Offensively, it can't get much worse than it went a week ago. However, the Saints will be without the 2 linemen that you mentioned, and Lucas Patrick and Eric McCoy. Running back, no Alvin Kamara. You do get MVS back. What's a realistic expectation for this offense? I kind of joked earlier in the week on Thursday that if there was a game for Spencer Rattler to gain some confidence, maybe get a win under his belt as a starter in the NFL, this is certainly the week to do so, especially in front of home fans. 1, is that realistic to think? 2, what do you expect out of Rattler today? And 3, just the fun stat to throw at you. I don't have the year, so you guys will have to excuse me. I'm not good. I didn't have it written down on my handy dandy notebook. But Spencer Rattler becomes like the 3rd quarterback in however many years it is to be a day 3 pick and start at least 5 games at quarterback.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm. And it joins Brock Purdy and a guy that probably should have played today if it weren't for injury, Gardner Minshew. There is not a whole lot of guys over the last, again, I don't have the number. I want to say it's like 20 years. It might be longer than that for a day 3 quarterback to pick to start at least 5 games his rookie year.
And my immediate thoughts went to Kirk Cousins, Gus Frerotte, although that might be more than 20 years back. I mentioned Dak Prescott. I don't know. That's an interesting stat.
Yeah, it may have been 5th round or later. Maybe it wasn't day 3. Maybe it was 5th round or later because Minshew would have been a 5th round pick. Purdy was a 7th round pick. Mr. Irrelevant. So anyway, yeah, I mean, some history there for Spencer Rattler. But what does it take to get his first win under his belt today?
I mean, moving the football, taking care of the football. He's been turning it over more lately too. I think a realistic expectation, and I'm not saying they'll reach this, but a realistic expectation for the Saints offense is to score at least 20 points. The Raiders defense statistically isn't as bad as what you'd think for a 3-12 team. They rank between 12th and 15th, in most defensive categories: total yardage, points, passing, rushing. So they're a little bit above middle of the pack. And even though they're going to be missing Max Crosby, they still have some nice defensive pieces in the front 7. Their secondary is abysmal. So they can get after the quarterback. They can stop the run. It does present a challenge for Spencer Rattler. What's left of that offensive line, Kendre Miller, Valdez Scantling, Jawan Johnson, if he decides to show up today, and Foster Moreau. So I think a realistic expectation for the Saints is 20 points. You put the ball in the end zone twice, which is twice more than what we've seen in recent weeks. You put the ball in the end zone twice, get a couple field goals, and maybe move the ball, keep control of the time of possession, to allow your defense, a little bit of rest and recovery time. I know that seems like a modest expectation, 20 points, but Saints haven't reached it very often this year. I think that if New Orleans does get 20, hit that 20 plateau, if the defense does even a tiny bit of their job, you stand a pretty good chance at winning a close game.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the Raiders defensively, kind of a middle of the pack team, which is weird for a team that is 3 and whatever at this point in the season. The offense has been the trouble for the Raiders. It has been really bad outside of really Brock Bowers.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned, maybe a bright spot at running back in White, who's now out for the season. But Bob, this is a team that's on, just like the Saints, their 3rd starting quarterback of the season. Remember, they had to play Desmond Ridder at some point this year as well. So this is a team that has struggled health-wise, but just struggled in talent overall. When you look at the Raiders' offense, outside of Brock Bowers, where could they really attack? What's been a bad Saints defense this year?
Well, because the Saints defense has been so bad, they could attack just about anywhere. Bowers is going to be the focal point of their offense. I mean, the man has 101, 102 receptions and about 1,100 yards. So the Saints are going to have to find a way to contain him. But the Raiders have Alexander Madison, who is a good complementary back. Now, because White is out, Madison is not their complimentary back. He has to be their featured back. But he can get himself on a roll. He's had some nice games this year. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. The Saints are going to have to contend for him, contend with him. Jacoby Myers, has nearly 900 receiving yards. And, Jacoby's been around a long time. He's a good, solid receiver. Now, again, he's the Raiders' number one wide receiver. Jacoby's never been he's a 3 and a 4. A similar situation to the Saints with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Valdes-Scantling has no business being anybody's number one receiver, but he could be a playmaker. Same with Jacoby Myers. So, the Raiders have some pieces to move the ball. Aiden O'Connell throws a nice downfield ball. I've been a fan of O'Connell ever since Purdue. It's clear he's not a long-term NFL starter, but I do think he has a future on this league as the type of guy who bounces around, could be a spot starter for teams, and maybe with the right supporting cast around him. And, if he has to play a few games as an injury replacement, he can win a few for you. He's not the type of bad that we have seen out of Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener. Don't disrespect Aiden Connell too bad. You give him time, and he's going to find Brock Bowers. He's going to find Madison. He's going to find Jacoby Myers. So the Saints are going to have to win those battles up at the line of scrimmage, stop the run, pressure O'Connell, who isn't very mobile, really. Pressure O'Connell, and you do that, you're going to get a couple of turnovers because that's what happened. What has happened with the Raiders all year.
Is this a game where we saw it a couple weeks ago where Cameron Jordan recorded 2 sacks against Washington? Is this a game where you see guys like Chase Young, Cameron Jordan, guys that haven't been finishers? I think that was a term you used earlier this year. Mm-hmm. Finishing plays. Is this a game where you could see those guys step up and actually finish plays for the Saints today?
Yeah, this is precisely the kind of game that that the Saints defense has feasted on statistically this year. To make their defensive standing rankings appear not quite as bad as what they really are. That game against the Giants a few weeks back, great example. When they sacked Giants quarterbacks, what was it, 6, 7, 8 times? I see this being a similar type of game. For Cam, Brissy, Granderson, Chase Young, and it better be. If you don't think of yourself as one of the league's worst teams, then you better perform well when you do face one of the league's worst teams. New Orleans has been uneven when it comes to that. But yeah, I do see this as the type of game where the Saints can. You used to call it get right games, but when you're 5-10, ain't nothing getting right. But I don't really have a term for it other than that.
Moral victory games. I don't know. Like at this point, though, you're gonna have those fans, right, that are out there going, well, we don't want to win, right? We want the better draft pick.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's a fan of a team, and we've talked about this plenty when it comes to, the players out there, like football's a different animal than some of the other sports when you can talk about like the term tanking for a draft pick, because there's a lot that goes into it, especially when you have, 22 guys plus special teams on the field. these guys aren't tanking. They're playing for their jobs. They're playing for their futures. I feel like a broken record because we've talked about it for like 2 weeks now, but there's a lot of these guys that their future, not just with the Saints, but in the NFL, is up in the air. And they got to play these last 2 weeks like that's the case. And they got to play desperate, and they got to play knowing that, hey, if you perform well these last 2 weeks, much better odds that you end up on a team or a practice squad or somewhere, opposed to not playing in the league at all or having to play in a spring league just to, try to get your way back to the NFL. So I think we'll see some better football, or some at least high effort football from some of those guys that are, borderline, or guys that are practice squad elevations. Speaking of practice squad elevations, you mentioned him earlier, and I do want to dig into it just a little bit, especially for the LSU folks out there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, standard elevation this week, hasn't been with the team very long, has had a long absence from football for mental health, and stepped away to take care of his chicken, as Marshawn Lynch used to say. What's a good expectation for him? It's nice to be back in your home state, right? But he is far removed from being the feature back on Kansas City teams that were, making Super Bowl pushes, and lost his job to Isaiah Pacheco, a 7th-round pick, and then stepped away from the game for a long time. I'm sure he stayed in good shape, but it is one thing, and we've talked about this before too, it's one thing to stay in shape, and it's another thing to stay in NFL-ready shape.
Yeah.
What are some realistic expectations for Clyde, and do you see an opportunity for him to potentially be back with the Saints next season?
I do see an opportunity for him, to put some plays, some tape out there, that cause the Saints, maybe to think about signing him, re-signing him, or another team to snatch him up, because he's talented back. I don't think there's any question about that. But having said that, I think today's expectations of him should be modest, for all the reasons that you mentioned, plus the fact that he really doesn't know this system, which means that you can't really realistically be an every down back because you don't know the protection packages. You're still learning the blocking the blocking schemes. So when Edwards-Helaire is going to be used, it's going to be on simple situations, goal line packages. Basically, when he is in the game, he is probably either going to get the ball or be a primary decoy, rather than have too much asked of him. Be it as a receiver out of the backfield, or a lot of people like to throw things out there like, just use him as a third down back. Yeah, okay, you could do that if you plan on throwing to him, or using him as a primary decoy as a receiver out of the backfield. But the danger in just throwing a guy out there for third down situations is, if he doesn't know your blitz pickups, your audibles, or just isn't good at blitz pickup, period, he's going to struggle. That's why we've seen Kendre Miller taken off the field in several third down situations, or when the Saints, like last week, when it reached a point where the Saints had to throw the ball on nearly every single down. That's been a weakness and a hindrance of Kendre Miller, and I expect it to hold back, some of the play responsibilities if Clyde Edwards-Helaire plays today.
I could see some goal line looks. I do think, and coaches don't care about storylines. Coaches don't care about making Bob's life any easier as a writer. But it would be a very fun, simple, nice write-up to say after such a long hiatus for mental health, that Clyde finds the end zone in his first game back. That would be fun. Be a nice little write-up. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But those are the situations you can look at. Third and short, where you're just handing the ball off and asking him to hit the A gap as hard as he can. And maybe some goal line situations. as well. There's been a lot of talk about the Saints' injuries, lack of receivers throughout this entire year. When we talk about Kendre Miller and we talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jamal Williams and just the running back room in general, typically when you talk about young quarterbacks, running backs are their best friends.
Mm-hmm.
That has not been the case for Spencer Rattler because guys have been, well, dropping like flies. When you look at the running backs that are available for the Saints today, I do not need to bring up the numbers from last week, nor do I want to bring up the rushing numbers from last week outside of Spencer Rattler. Do you see this as a game where Rattler can have even an ounce of confidence handing the ball off and having those guys generate something offensively? Obviously, it's going to be better than last week, knock on wood, because it can't get any worse than last
Right.
week,
Right.
rushing number-wise. But do you see this being a situation where there's going to be a little less pressure on Rattler to have to make something happen?
Well, I mean, I sure hope so, because if it doesn't happen early, it's not going to happen again, and the Saints are going to lose again. And I wrote about this a little bit in my factors to watch. That we actually released last night instead of this morning. Talise Fawaga and Trevor Penning are still playing today. Even though the interior offensive line is going to be in shambles, two basically practice squad guys, and a putrid Cesar Ruiz. So I think the Saints would be foolish to try to run inside very often. But Edwards-Helaire, Kendre Miller, they can both run. They both have the agility to be off tackle runners. So in my opinion, that's where you have to focus. Run behind Fawaga, run behind Penning, and hopefully those interior blockers will be able to, at least get a little bit of push to keep, inside penetration from happening and blowing plays up, or perhaps, getting some setting up some cutback lanes, especially as the game progresses. I can see the Saints establishing at least some semblance of a running game, on off tackle runs, and pitch plays and that sort of thing. And they need to. Because it's quite obvious that at this point in his career, Spencer Rattler is not a guy that you want to throw the ball 30, 35 times a game. Nor is he, and nor do you want any quarterback to do that with the lack of weapons that the Saints have in their receiving core. If you can't run the ball, today's going to be another ugly outing for the Saints offense.
I think you're absolutely right. I want to go back to Brock Bowers before we kind of pivot and say goodbye to the folks this morning. Brock Bowers is an interesting one to talk about. Obviously, super talented guy, right? Has what? Let's pull up the numbers so I don't mess this up. 101 receptions for 1,067 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, outstanding. He is putting up the numbers that a lot of people thought Kyle Pitts would. Talking about guys that are just generational tight end talents. We had to have that difficult conversation back during the draft, right? If Brock Bowers fell to the Saints, was that a guy that was a quote unquote can't miss type of prospect? And that was a debate for us through our draft process for most of it. Now the Saints ended up going with Fawaga in the first round, and Fawaga has performed extremely well. And has, I think he has met or maybe even exceeded a little bit the expectations we had of him, especially moving from right tackle to left tackle. I think he's made the transition very smoothly. But Brock Bowers, and he has lived up to every ounce of the hype, even on a bad football team. Imagine if he had a quarterback, right? I know we say that about a lot of young guys, but could you imagine if he had a quarterback, or if you could throw him into a system like Gronk was in, or like Jimmy Graham was in his career? But Brock Bowers is a guy that I'm worried about. I mean, obviously the talent's there. But if you're a Saints fan and you're looking at the defense and you're looking at the options of guys that can cover Brock Bowers today, right? And you're like, well, Pete Warner, edge Brock Bowers. Demario Davis, edge Brock Bowers. Tyrann Mathieu at this stage in his career, edge Brock Bowers. So with all of that said, there's going to be a lot of attention on the rookie tight end today. So my question to you, past today with Brock Bowers, is will Brock Bowers go down as the best player from his draft class?
Oh man, I don't know.
Way too early question.
It is a way too early question. But I'm such a fan of mismatch weapons, especially at the tight end spot. I've been screaming for the Saints to get one for years. And even though we had that draft debate about Bowers, hey, what if he's available for, when the Saints are on the clock? We all know that Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen, they wouldn't have made that pick because they just ignore the tight end position, at least ignore prioritizing it. I do think that Bowers has the potential to be the best player in his draft class, mainly because he is that damn good. But a lot depends on if he, how long he stays with the Raiders, what kind of system, what kind of quarterback they give him, if they're going to continue to feature him. So on and so forth. Is he going to be used like a Kellen Winslow and a Shannon Sharp and a Rob Gronkowski and a Jimmy Graham when Jimmy was here? Another guy is a Hall of Fame semi-finalist now, Antonio Gates. If he's going to be used that way, and he has the kind of quarterbacks that Winslow had in Fouts and Graham had in Breeze, et cetera, then yeah. I think Brock Bowers is that talented, to be a generational type of player.
And I'll ask you this to close out, and we can both discuss this a little bit, or we can't. It's totally up to you, however you want to go about this one, because it isn't game related, but it was news this week when it came to the New Orleans Saints, and there are feelings amongst NFL circles, which, first off, let's debunk that real quick for all of you fans that may or may not be happy, sad, or in the middle. Feeling amongst NFL circles is just like me going, the feeling amongst Saints reporters that I have contact with is this. Say what you will about it, but it is a very headliney, catch-grabby phrase to use.
Oh, yeah.
Is the feeling amongst NFL circles. And it's like, well, which NFL circles? Like, what does that entail, right? Like, it is one thing to say, like, several NFL GMs, right? Or several NFL owners or whatever. But just to use the phrase, like, NFL circles, like, okay. Like, again, that's like me saying, the feeling amongst Saints circles, and it's really just the Saints reporters that I have contact with. Anyway, but the report is amongst many NFL circles that the general belief is Mickey Loomis is going to favor a coach he already knows through this process of looking for a head coach in the offseason. Aaron Glenn's names came up a lot. We talked about it on Thursday's show. I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout now until whenever a head coach is hired, and probably past that, depending on who is hired as head coach for the Saints. Bob, does this give you more concerns or less concerns when it comes to Mickey Loomis? Because Mickey Loomis is a guy who, dang, if you had asked people 5 years ago, people would have thought was untouchable, would never get fired, to all of a sudden is a guy who, at least from the fan base's perspective, is on the hot seat. A guy who may need to be taken a closer look at. How do you feel about the NFL circles, air quotes?
The NFL circles comment just cracks me up. Because these guys, the national media, they never paid attention to the Saints, even when they were relevant, any more than what they absolutely positively had to. Now that the Saints are bad, they're definitely not going to pay attention to them. So, they're just. There are a couple that talk to each other. The NFL circles thing is probably like, Schefter saying to Rappaport, "Hey, do you think Mickey Loomis is going to hire Aaron Glenn because Aaron Glenn used to work for him?" And Rappaport says, "Yeah," and then Josina Anderson pops her head around the cubicle and says, "Yeah, you know what? I think that's what's going to happen too." Lockenfora, one of them texts Lockenfora or Cowherd. Saying, "Hey, do you think Mickey Loomis is going to hire Aaron Glenn because he used to work for him?" Yeah, I think that's the NFL circles right there. Okay, we're done talking about the Saints today. Let someone print this headline and move on. F the NFL media. I say it over the national NFL media over and over again. F them. Just put a little bit of effort into some of your work. That's all I ask. Now, having said that, could Mickey Loomis hire Aaron Glenn because Aaron Glenn used to work for him? Yeah, it could happen. I think it's lazy reporting just to assume that Mickey is going to do that because the last guy he hired, he knew. He didn't know Sean Payton. He took a chance on Sean Payton. Now, he tried to hire Mike McCarthy, who he did know. But Brendan, if you're the boss somewhere and you have a position to fill, aren't you going to reach out first to the people who you know, the ones that you feel most comfortable with? I think that's natural. So, Rizzy, Aaron Glenn, Joe Brady, yeah, they're going to get interviews, and they should. To automatically assume at this point that such and such is a front runner when all the coaching openings haven't even been finalized yet. And I've said this before. That's why I haven't talked about the coaching openings often or in depth, because we don't know who's going to be open. We don't know who's going to be truly available. Who else is going to get fired? A retread. If Zach Taylor gets fired in Cincinnati, he'll be on the unemployment line for about 10 seconds. That kind of situation. And I've said it before about Aaron. I think Aaron is a fantastic coach. I think he's going to make a good head coach somewhere, and he better damn well get hired by someone. And I wouldn't be overly angry if it was the New Orleans Saints. Personally, I prefer them go outside, kind of find a younger offensive innovator, a la a Sean Payton. That doesn't mean you get a Sean Payton, but that's who I'm trying to strike gold with next. Again, to just assume that Mickey Loomis is going to hire Aaron Glenn because he knows him, I think that's lazy, and short-sighted reporting.
I agree to everything you just said. And it's not just with jobs. I think it's just anything in general. You need an opinion on something, right? Or there's an area of expertise that someone else has that you don't. You're not going to just go to a random... I'll use an example, right? Bob's been in the jewelry business. If I have a jewelry question, do I just go to my local Jared K, whatever, and ask somebody there? No, I call Bob. Right? Hey, Bob, what do you think about this?
Yeah, and you have.
Yeah, and I have. That's just like that. I have a movie question, right? Or something like that. I don't just go to my local AMC theater and go, "Hey, 16-year-old behind the counter, what do you think of this movie?" I call someone that I know who is a critic or in the film business, and I ask that question. "Hey, what do you think of this?" Right? That's normal. So, yeah, if I had a job opening in anything, I'm going to call the people that I know. "Hey, would you be interested in this? Hey, you want to just sit and talk about this?" And half the time, it's not really an interview. It's just two guys catching up and going, "Hey, well, this just came across my desk." That type of thing. That all makes sense. I am with you in the boat of, well, I would mind if it's Aaron Glenn. It's not because of Aaron Glenn at all, because I think he's a great coach. Like you said, I think he's going to get an opportunity and should get an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere. But I'm just ready to move away from anything and everything that was associated with Sean. And that's nothing against Sean Payton, the greatest coach in the history of the team, will be a Saints Hall of Famer. I know that there's some sour taste on the way it ended from fans and whatnot. I get it, but ultimately, so much done for the franchise. But with that said, and I think I used this example Thursday. It's the ex-girlfriend that just won't go away, you know? And that's where we're at, is it's like, okay, can we just move on from this, right? There's just no need for this anymore. Like, how long is Sean Payton's tenure going to have a chokehold on this franchise?
Yeah, and look, it's not to say or even suggest that Aaron Glenn is a Sean Payton puppet, because I frankly do not think that that's the case. But you have to, my opinion, you have to do something that's going to win a little bit of your fan base back.
Yep.
And the perception is that Aaron Glenn is just another Sean Payton clone or Sean Payton wannabe or Sean Payton puppet. And the fan base, I think, is ready to move on. That's not to say that you make your hire based off of the fan, what the fans do and do not want. But you're going to have to win some of that perception back. Otherwise, what truly matters to owners and front office executives is going to really start to be affected, and that is the pocketbook. Maybe season ticket sales go down, merchandise sales go down, overall attention goes down. First and foremost, you have to hit on this hire if you're Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson, because you have to start setting the groundwork for a successful future. And again, maybe Aaron Glenn is that, maybe he's not. But I also think that, to your point, the fans want to be rid of the Sean Payton stink, the Sean Payton leftovers. And that's what they feel like they're going to get if they get a Joe Brady and Aaron Glenn. That's not necessarily the real case, but that is certainly going to be the perception.
Yeah. And like you said, you can't make decisions based off your fan base in terms of who you hire. But if you make a hire like this and the Saints don't turn it around, and the Saints are still, and frankly, they will be bad, right? That's just the way the roster's constructed, right? I don't foresee this team shocking the world next year and being a team that wins 12 plus games. I just don't see it happening, right? There's still going to be a team that's battling for the NFC South because the NFC South is bad. And that's their only way into the playoffs. But if they come out and they start the season like 1-5 and they've hired Aaron Glenn, I don't even want to know what the fan base is going to be like.
Right.
And to your point, the Saints will start to feel it, right? Because tickets sales will go down, attendance will go down. You'll be able to get tickets to go into the Superdome for like $10. And it's going to be this whole sad song. And we will, again, talk about this throughout the last week, this week, next week, and throughout the quote unquote off season for the Saints, which starts, not too long from now. So it'll be interesting. But the Saints could put some not so sour taste in fans' mouth if they are able to get a victory today at home in what is their final home game of the season. Bob, you and I will record something a little bit later, win or lose or draw. I'm
rooting for a tie. What the hell?
Root for a tie? That's my least favorite thing. Like, I still can't stand that. Like, what other sport? Soccer. As soon as I started asking the question, soccer is the other sport where you can tie. Like, what other sports can you tie in? Soccer. And that's really about it. It drives me nuts. I don't think the NFL should tie. I think you have to have a winner. But that's my opinion. But at this rate, yeah, screw it. Let's tie. Let's tie the Raiders with some obscure score of like 12-12. Like something that doesn't even make sense. Let's have 2 missed field goals in overtime to just tie. With that said, Bob's delusional dreams can be found at, I'm just kidding, but Bob's work can actually be found in numerous places, including right here on YouTube. You can also find the podcast on Apple and Spotify. But more importantly, Bob writes articles. And by clicking and reading those articles, Bob gets paid. So how can we get Bob paid today?
Yeah, Bob got to eat this month. And to help Bob eat, you can follow all of my work, along with that of John Hendricks and Kyle Mosley, first off at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or the SI.com team page for the New Orleans Saints. I also post all of my articles as well as our show links on my personal social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook and at Bobby R2613 on Twitter. Brendan already mentioned how you can follow how you can follow the shows, click on the past shows, etc. It's easier to do that, folks. Also, if you are a member of the Bayou Blitz Facebook page, which is extremely easy to find, extremely easy to join, and extremely fun, my opinion, once you have joined, or link on to our Bayou Blitz Twitter page as well, at Bayou Blitz Pod. So make sure, if you're not already a member, make sure that you are of those two things, and start pulling in other Saints fans too, or family members, because this offseason is going to be interesting. There's going to be all kinds of news and rumors and reports and analysis. Brendan and I and Saints News Network, we're going to be on top of it all. So make sure you give us a follow.
For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. Bobby, it's going to be an interesting offseason. I don't know if we said this last year, but it is the fun, catchy radio thing to say. And that is this the most important offseason in the history of the New Orleans Saints? Is it the most important? No. Is it very important for the direction of this franchise for the next half a decade? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So we will be on top of all of it. We'll be talking about it. We'll be answering your guys' questions throughout the off season. And for at least this live show, that's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. We'll be back with hopefully a post-game extravaganza. What do we call a post-game tie?
Post-game hilarity. That is post-game hilarity.
I hope we get that just for Bob. I hope we get it just for Bob. But either way, we'll be back with a post-game show. You can catch that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods first thing in the morning. Until then, I hope you guys enjoy your early morning. Get your coffee in, because I know listening to us probably has your head spinning without it. And hopefully you guys enjoy what is the final home game of the 2024 regular season. Until next time, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and we'll see you next time here on the Bayou Blitz. Who dat?
Who dat?